This is such a beautiful reading. These first couple of readings are, they're kind of otherworldly. Last week, you may remember that it was the reading of, excuse me, the divine manifesting through vibration turned into sound. And today it's about light. Just last week I was co-teaching with a few people who, they just haven't necessarily been teaching as long as I have, so we have these discussions after each class. And I was saying to them, it's really important when you're trying to teach people something, and particularly if they're new at it, that you don't use the words that you're trying to define to define them. They don't know what that means. So we can't get up and just give talks about consciousness and vibration and concentration. And I have to say very much to both of their credits, they taught right after that and just very beautifully brought in real life experiences. I mean, they incorporated that right into their next class. And then yesterday I read this reading and I thought, instant karma. Just try and talk about this without using these words too much. But really, it's actually a very beautiful reading. It defines our path, this particular path of these particular gurus. It says, this is your goal. Your goal is to remember as much as you can, to find ways to realize that God is everything, that God has manifested this world, that his energy, his vibration is in every fiber of being. That beautiful song that the choir sang, What is Love? And the whole song just is this sermon, written so beautifully by Swami Kriyananda. But there's a line in there that says, every atom is his home. And it's just so much the truth. This is why Yogananda has said to us, center everywhere, circumference nowhere, that this divine energy, this absolute, total, still, non-vibrating consciousness suddenly and gently started vibrating and manifested everything, so that there's nothing that we can see in this earth that isn't of the divine. Now, we believe that, and we try as hard as we can to make it the truth of our lives every day, and I'll speak more about that. But it isn't so for everyone. When we think about scientists who believe that everything came into being through the Big Bang Theory. By the way, I was trying to, I don't think the scientists would be very pleased about this. Yesterday I tried to Google Big Bang Theory because I don't really know what the Big Bang Theory is. I mean, I get that it's what I've heard, that it's this point. I mean, you can't even call it a point. It's an essence of what they call singularity, that in this tiniest place, those are all the wrong words, by the way, and I know that, but I don't know the physics of it, exists infinite energy, infinite everything, until it just really got too big for itself. And it just started expanding and creating heat, and then it manifested in physical form. I think that's close enough for our purposes today. But you can't find that on the internet, because when you Google Big Bang Theory, all you read about now, literally the first 20 things are about the television show Big Bang Theory. It's very funny. I thought, the physicists must just be dying about this. It is, by the way, a very funny show. And it's everything I know about the Big Bang Theory, I know from them. So, anyway, that's what the scientists believe. And really, if you think back to the Judeo-Christian doctrine, It's not, in a way, far from that, at least from how I was taught, being born and raised Jewish. I don't believe that anymore, and I don't think it was the intention of Moses to teach that anymore, but I only learned that from Master through Swamiji about what Moses was really saying. I lived the first half of my life having no idea and believing, as I think many Christians do, that there's one Son of God, that there is no hope that we could ever become that. That's not even a goal. It's not even a thought. In fact, it's blasphemy. I started thinking last night, they were furious with Jesus because Jesus came and said, he didn't even say, but other people said, this is a manifestation of pure divine energy. He is the Son of God. And they killed him for it. So really what most of us have been taught early on, until we step foot on this path, is of a great separateness of all realities. This is what happens when you think about God creating something. You look at all of the old art with God reaching down. Our finest art. God's always separate and reaching down or out to us. And those are the images and the belief that many of us grew up with. But not on this path. This path says what this reading says. It says there's a vibration here, and that vibration became all of us, that it's a total illusion and delusion for us that we are separate. And furthermore, it tells us that the way we'll know this is through our own experience. It's not a belief, which is a lot of what the Judeo-Christian doctrine is. It's not philosophy. When I think of the old Jewish rabbis, ancient rabbis, sitting around for hours discussing the minutiae from their heads, the details of the Torah, of these beautiful writings, but turning it all into an intellectual conquest. But that's not what we're taught. What Master came to show us, and what all of the great saints have said, is that if you still your consciousness enough, you will realize who you are. You'll realize it beyond a doubt. You won't have to have any discussions or arguments about it. It's not an intellectual thing. You cannot get there from here. This is the beauty of the story of John Dedimer was his name. I was a monk. And I know we've heard that story, but it's an extraordinary story. He was a Jesuit priest, really, but he knew the teachings so well that he was eventually taken to Rome, into the Vatican, thank you. And he taught there. He taught everybody there. He taught what were considered the most highly evolved Catholic priests. And he loved those teachings, and he believed in those teachings until he developed tuberculosis. And then he was sent to Switzerland, and he was put just in a sanitarium to rest, which is how they treated TB in those days. And so he just prayed all day. He prayed and he talked to Christ, and Christ came to him. And he realized in those visions and in those experiences, which is what we are taught to do with meditation, to go deep until we too have those experiences that said to him, all of what you've been teaching, it's not the truth. God is not separate from us. God, we are God. We are pure divine energy. Everything is. And with just the greatest love and respect, he had to go back and leave the church. Interestingly, he wound up in the desert, not far from 29 Palms, which was Yogananda's home there. Now, we're not the only ones who know this. I was given, one of the gifts I was given for Christmas, I have no idea why I picked it up last night. It was just a fluke, really. But it was a book, I don't remember the name of it, but it's something about Sundays. And it's a collection of interviews that Oprah Winfrey has done over the years. I've never watched Oprah Winfrey. The first time I really watched Oprah Winfrey was after she gave that speech at the Grammys a couple weeks ago. But I've always believed from what I've heard about her that she's a pretty great lady, soul, who knows some of the truth. But I think from the way this book is, and if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter, but that she has did a series of Sunday interviews that she called Super Soul interviews or something. Anyway, I just picked it up. I was glancing through it, and it's remarkable. It's hundreds of interviews with people, with politicians, with ex-presidents, with actors, with actresses, with writers, with artists, with spiritual teachers, every one of them saying this same truth. I mean, you really have to say to yourself, I have to really reevaluate how I look at the whole world. I just pulled a short one, and I wanted to read it to you because this man, who I don't know, Maston Kipp is his name. I had to look him up too. But he said, I believe everyone has a God-sized hole inside of them that we try to fill with shopping or with a relationship or food or sex or drugs. But it's not out there. It's in here. It's an internal connection. And that's what a spiritual practice, listening to your intuition, having a creative expression, or being of service is all about. That is how you sustainably fill up your God-sized hole. Otherwise, it's like a drop that's disconnected from the ocean. You just wither and die. And that's really what our teachings say. It's just so beautifully and so simply put. If we think we're not connected to all that is, we die. We had a retreat, a little retreat yesterday for people who've been initiated into Kriya Yoga, which is a form of meditation that we teach here. And we were talking about a talk that one of the people at Ananda who initiates people into Kriya, whose name is Jaya, said, just in one of his talks, when he kept saying to people, we have to remember this is a matter of life and death. Just remembering this, just finding ways as we go to remember who we really are. Because he didn't say this, but this man did, Maston Kipp. Otherwise, it's like a drop that's disconnected from the ocean. We just wither and die. There's a beautiful story in the autobiography of a yogi where Yogananda, as a young man, has a friend whose name is Dhiren. And Dhiren was kind of an avowed atheist, but he was having a moment of panic. And he was saying to himself, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some type of world, something going on? What if everything Mukunda, Yogananda's boyhood name, is telling me is the truth? So Yogananda says to him, let me take you to meet my guru, Sri Yukteswar. He'll initiate you into Kriya Yoga, and you will know the truth. So they're supposed to go and they're supposed to meet Sri Yukteswar at a 9 o'clock train. But just as they're getting ready to leave at 8:30, Sri Yukteswar comes telepathically to Yogananda, and he says to him, don't meet the 9 o'clock train, I'm not on it. Wait, I'll be on the 10 o'clock train. So Yogananda says to his friend, you know, I just heard from Master. I mean, they're sitting there together. I just heard from Master, we're not supposed to get the train. And Dhiren says to him, you and your silly ideas, because remember, he's an atheist. He doesn't believe any of this. He goes to the train. While he's at the train, Sri Yukteswar appears to Yogananda. And Yogananda describes this. It shook him up. That's how he says it to us. Now remember, we believe that these great avatars come and have these experiences so that we can learn from them. Yogananda did not need to learn this lesson. But in the autobiography, he relates it to us. He says, I didn't know what to think. There he was. And Sri Yukteswar even says, this is not just a vision. Look, it's skin and bone and tissue. I'm here. I'm real. And he said, I came to you because God commanded me to give you this experience right now. And then Yogananda says, after that, he just starts disappearing, you know, from the legs up, right in front of him. He's sitting there, really shaken. Dhiren comes back. Of course, Sri Yukteswar was not at the train station. They take off, and he arrives on the 10 o'clock train. And Dhiren is just looking at Master Yogananda, saying, how could you have known that? But Sri Yukteswar said to him, I came because I was commanded to give you this experience. It's rare to have this happen in the world. Well, what does that experience do for us? It's, if we believe it happened, we then have to say to ourselves, all of what we believe about time and space and about this physical world being what we think it is. Look, that chair is so solid. Don't tell me that's just energy put to vibration and that somebody could just move through it, or that people levitate, or that people walk on water. I'm not going to believe that. I know what I see. And then Sri Yukteswar appears, and he says, look, I'm here now, and then he disappears. You know, I've shared this story with you, with some of you before, but I believe some of these stories come to us, and I believe they come to all of us because they're meant to be shared. One night, I was having I had a profound experience with a young woman in my life. She's the daughter of a very dear friend. I was literally at her birth. I've been with her ever since. She's now 40-some. But she and I were sort of on the outs for about 3 years, and it was very troubling to me. And her mother told me one night that she was very sick, that she had an infection in her leg, that it wouldn't go away. She lives on the East Coast. So I went home, and I just worried that. It bothered me. I had to teach a class. I went home after the class. It was very strong in me. I felt like I should get on a plane and fly to the East Coast. It was an absurd thought, but it was very real for me. I felt like I had to take care of her. But when I got home, I sat to meditate, and I just sat like this, offering her up to the masters. The next thing I know, I open my eyes. It's 45 minutes later, and I'm just still sitting there. Now, for me, that's just virtually impossible. I can't sit like that. Nothing happened for me, by the way. I didn't know anything. I was just still sitting there. And so I just finished my meditation, and I went to bed. And the next morning, I wrote her. We hadn't been in touch in 3 years. And I said, I just want you to know, Mom told me what's going on with you. I love you, and I'm praying for you. And she wrote me back, and she said to me, she calls me Aunt Sal. Aunt Sal, you will not believe this. And I thought to myself, whatever it is, I'm going to believe it. And she said, I'm too embarrassed to tell you. And I wrote her back and said, you don't have to tell me, but you don't have to be embarrassed either. Probably it's upsetting you because it seems so unreal. Anyway, back and forth. She tells me this story that I came to her in a dream. But she says to me, it was not a dream. You were there. I know you were there. You picked me up out of my bed. You held me in your arms. You carried me downstairs. She tells me this whole story. She said, you were hurting me. You were holding me too tight. She said, but I knew that I was being held with all the love in the world. She said, I felt I might never be loved like that again. So I just let you do it. Then she describes what happened, after which you took me upstairs and you put me back to bed. So I write her and I say to her, do you happen to remember what time that was? And of course, it was those 45 minutes. She writes me back and said, of course I remember. You were here. Now, I had nothing to do with that. Maybe it was the power of my prayer in that way. Maybe when you pray that hard, we know, when you call to God with that kind of a force, please take care of her. So God did. But for me, what happens to me? I have that experience. I'm no longer reading it about Yogananda, though I completely believe his experience, and I believe those things happen. But suddenly I'm saying to myself, what is real here? What is happening? Is anything that I've ever believed in our festival, which I want to come back to a minute, but when we say in the festival, all that we thought was darkness was but light? I have to ask myself, that experience was one of the most profound and life-changing experiences I've ever had, because it just said to me, nothing is as you see it, Shanti. Do your work. Get to it right now. You better bring so much energy to moving forward on this path to realize the truth. Look at this. God really is everywhere. That extraordinary divine love, it's everywhere. It connected you from your little house in Palo Alto to Virginia. It's everywhere, effortlessly. You poured out your heart with love, and it was just carried with the divine to a knee who is healed with it. That's an amazing story. Now, it gets your attention, and it got mine. I was thinking yesterday about the festival. It came to me about how this reading and how this lesson that we're trying to learn, how we say it in our festival, that we read every week, and how beautiful these words are. Ever and again, through your awakened sons, the answer comes. The forming of stars and moons, of galaxies revolving on the tides of space. And Swami goes on with everything that's created, mountains, forests, snowy wastes, and dark, silent ocean deeps had but this for its design, the birth of life. And with life's birth, the dawn of self-awareness. And he goes on, and I'm going to say a little more of it, because listen to this. All of creation, everything we know, had but this for its design ever and again through your awakened sons. The dawn of self-awareness. We are born. We have that great, good karma. And then what? Passage through dim corridors of waking consciousness, life after life. We go through what Swamiji calls dim corridors of doubt, of disbelief, of wondering. Swamiji says to us, to emerge at last into infinite light, into perfect joy. I always think of the festival when I'm reading it or listening to it as the bird flies out and then he comes home. But I just have this image that it's just such a circle. We take off, we leave our home in the divine, then we have this life's birth, the dawn of self-awareness. We go through these dim corridors, and at last we come home. At last we have these experiences which say to us, nothing is real except this. This reading sound nebulous, sound impossible to talk about. It's the kernel of everything that's true. It's the essence of life. None of what we see is true. None of what we feel is true. None of what we believe. Like he said, this other man, we look for it in a relationship, in food, in sex, in drugs, in new homes, in more degrees. No, it's never out there. To emerge at last into infinite light, into perfect joy. That's when we become self-aware. How many experiences do we have to have? How much do we need to hear what's happened? We need to, in the festival also, it says, now we've been given the sacred keys of awakening. Abundant now is our hope. What are those sacred keys? It's Kriya Yoga. It's meditation. The end of that story, I have the words here because, Master says it so beautifully. But that story where he's saying to Dhiren, he says, let me take you to my master. He'll initiate you into Kriya Yoga, and you'll know. And of course, Dhiren became a believer. How could he not? But they did go with Sri Yukteswar, who made it on the 10 a.m. train. And he initiated Dhiren into Kriya Yoga. But Master had said to him earlier, Kriya Yoga, it calms the dualistic turmoil by a divine inner certainty. Isn't that beautiful? You sit to meditate. You use these sacred keys of awakening that we've been given, and it calms that inner duality. Everything that we think is outside of ourselves, all that we thought was light is but darkness. It helps us turn around by a divine inner certainty. It's so simple. It's absolutely so utterly simple to come home, to really rest in this heart of love, to quit chasing our tails or a carrot or anything else that's out there that doesn't get us anywhere. Swami Kriyananda said it so beautifully. He said, all we're meant to do is to come home and rest in the heart of love with the divine. And I just heard, I don't know if in something I was listening to yesterday, if Jojish said it or Swamiji said it, but they said it like it was a quote. I've never read it. But the Master said, everybody can meditate. Everybody can meditate. He said there's very rare physical or emotional condition that will get in the way. We just need to feel motivated. We just need to realize what is out there, this vast sea of calm, of peace, just like what Lahari was saying, all of these manifestations of the divine. We are it. There is nothing else. It's who we are. We just, that first line of Samadhi, this poem, vanish the veil of light and shade. It took me years till I wasn't saying light and dark. No, it's so much more subtle than that. Vanish the veil of light and shade. There's nothing. I, everywhere, I. Master just writes it over and over. He says, we are all this vast container until those very last lines of Samadhi. I didn't bring it, but I know it. Till he says, a tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself. That's what they want for us. They want this little bubble to become the sea of mirth. We don't lose anything. We gain everything. We don't lose anything. We gain everything.